Hi, my name is Thomas Season. I'm in the Leader 300 class I have this semester. And as part of our leadership analysis, I did Richard Branson. He's well known across Europe, not too much around the American area, but I feel like what he had and his abilities really shine light on what we've been learning this entire semester in leadership. So let's get started. First off, when you think of American leaders, you think of these three: Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, and Warren Buffett. They're constantly getting media attention for what they do. They have a large net worth, as you see, over $200 billion combined. But it's good to get away from those. A lot of European leaders, they're very diverse. They have a larger spread of them. And I think that gives me more pull to stop the normal, every leadership class focus on these three. We get a bunch of information on them. It's glad to get away from that. So here we go. The definition of leadership often gets skewed, and there's so many different adaptations as you see here. These are a lot from sources I pulled throughout the semester. They have different traits like honesty, communication, confidence. It is a culmination of all those, and some don't offer some of these traits. I mean, you can kind of, the methods we studied throughout this semester really kind of pin down what leadership is and breaks it down into different methods. But Richard Branson, just starting out, he does own Virgin. It's a huge company. They have hundreds and hundreds of companies, from airliners to everything. They help communities. They just have a huge impact, and that's what first got me looking towards, hey, who owns this company? What all does he do? What all does he invest in? How can I be like him? So he was born July 18th, 1950. He was born in London, oldest of three kids. In a lower to middle class family. His mom was a radio host. Granted, this was in the 50s, so not a lot of income coming in there. And his dad was a lawyer more for the state and the country. He didn't do a lot of big suits, things like that. More just a common day-to-day lawyer for the people. He had two younger sisters, so he was the oldest. Early on, he didn't have a good school track record at all. Most of his grades and most of his teachers are being quoted as he just didn't have, the enthusiasm was there, but the ability to pay attention and stay around it was not there. And he had dyslexia, which probably wasn't diagnosed too properly back then. But he was in a private school until he was on age 16. He kept bad grades in the classroom, and that kind of pulled over to where he didn't see college as being the best fit. So he moved into the city right away, left his family, and spent the first 2 years in the city homeless. He was just trying to get a bunch of startups off the ground. He had the determination and the drive, and he saw what he wanted to become. He just didn't know the way to get there. He finally got his first big break when he released a magazine called Student. He noticed that local colleges weren't getting a ton of constant sourcing of local and kind of worldwide information, because the television was not as developed as it is now, and social media, of course, didn't exist. So he made this magazine called Student, which was a good combination of day-to-day interactions and news with kind of what people also liked, which was a bunch of rock music. He would interview people like Mick Jagger, a lot of rock industry people, and that was what his desire ended up being. But just getting started there, he noticed that the people enjoyed that aspect of his paper a lot, and that kind of culminated into multiple companies, but I'm getting ahead of myself. The lifetime career that he's had, he's worth $4.1 billion, which, like I said, isn't a lot compared to the other numbers, but he does own 400 successful companies that are maintaining day to day. And he continues to get more and adapt, and he's really taken over every market. He does airlines, railroads. He has his own boat venture team that he has. He sponsors a lot of stuff. He's overall an investor. I read a bit of his book when I was first diving in this paper, and it was very well out. It kind of explains his childhood and everything, and kind of what took him to be a leader. So I suggested to people it is a good read. And a philanthropist, he is very involved in his community and does everything he can. He owns his own island, which is pretty cool. Not a lot of people besides like Pablo Escobar have that. So I found that pretty nice. So the leadership challenge is what we've been focused on the majority of this semester. It's 5 big practices that were made by these two people, James and Barry, in 1987. They had different theories that they brought aboard, but this is the big one that a lot of people adapted to, and a lot of leadership can look on this and really grow, and a lot of professors kind of model around this. And so it's just 5 things. It's model the way, share an inspired vision, challenge the process, enable others to act, and encourage the heart. Simple enough. They kind of dive into their own subsections, and you can break them down. But the big thing, model the way. You want to set an example for your team. I think that really helps. Inspire to share vision. You want people to see the future and see what they can do to impact the future and how they can help. I think that really gets them involved. Challenge the process. You got to take risks and you got to experiment to get off the ground. And I've got numerous examples from him coming. Enable others to act, which is strengthen others, get your team where they need to be, and they'll be successful and carry them with you, or they'll help you more than you can ever help them in the long run. But getting them motivated, I think, is a big thing. And encourage the heart, which is very similar. You have to acknowledge people's small victories, take praise in those, and be able to get people enthusiastic about their job. A lot of retail communities don't survive because of that. I mean, there's numerous failures you can look at because one of these traits are missing in a leadership chain. So first off, model the way. He started out early selling things. He sold a type of bird throughout the winter, Christmas trees. He would just do whatever in those first 2 years of his time in London. Didn't really go much. Finally noticed that weak point in the college magazine market, and it was something he wanted to do. He always had to get his team committed, and he always was starting out. It's very hard to dedicate yourself to someone that wasn't really established yet. So he did a great job. Persuasion's a big thing of his. He's a huge extrovert and can do that. So his magazine, like I was saying earlier, is just a good mix of overall information around the world, which college it needs at the time. And then in their passive sections, it was more interviews with celebrities and local rock icons and things like that. Challenge the process. His records, he eventually took the magazine over to a record store. He opens on record stores, and they were very, very big. And they're now one of the biggest record. He's got his own record label that's one of the biggest in the London area or Europe as a whole. But right off the gate, he experimented. He took a lot of risks because there was a lot of record companies back then. He was getting challenged at every corner. He'd put one up at the local competition, but he could actually cut costs by not. So many distributors and licensing agencies made the prices of records very expensive. He kind of cut those costs a little bit and didn't take as much of his cut out of the overall profits, and that allowed them to grow, being able to sell cheap records. He had a ton of mistakes up front, and I'll get to that here in a second, but the big thing is that he learned from those. Enabling others to act and sharing inspired vision kind of go hand in hand. There's a lot of quotes you can look up from Richard Branson. He does a great job motivating his team. But the big one that stuck with me is there's no greater thing you can do with your life and your work than follow your passions in a way that serves the world and you. I think that really reflects well on what he's done throughout his entire life. He's very passionate about what he does, and he always wants to help and please others, and I think those going hand in hand is a big trait for me to be able to develop as well. He was always positive about how the future could be and what he wanted to do to shape that and help that. Encourage the heart. This is the part where he lacks that. He had a bunch of trouble in the 70s, a bunch of run-ins from all the information I pulled up. He was charged with tax evasion and numerous other counts of kind of like fraud and undercutting things in the 1970s. Since then, no such trouble. He did divorce his first wife. He's now remarried, has a lot of kids, and dedicates himself towards those kids. And now he has such a huge charity outreach program that most of this has been forgiven, and he's definitely turned himself around and become a better person and been more focused around this out of the 5. Another thing we looked at throughout our semester was different types of leadership away from just the 5 important forces. This is situational leadership. This was created by Blanchard and Hershey. Looking at what he's done here, he invested in new ventures such as airline companies. He's been involved in everything. He owns his own island. He'll go and invest in any local. He's kind of like a commonality Shark Tank for us, where he can go look at these smaller companies, pick them up. And with that, you have to be there's so many different problems that arise in different businesses if you're not focusing on a main, like music industry or airlines. Him being so involved with so many of them has really gotten him very well developed in situational leadership. We've also looked at other traits such as the DISC assessment. I've done this on myself, and it is good to kind of reflect and see where he would be at. He's definitely shown the dominance behavior type. That's that he's very result-oriented. He's very direct with his ways. And he often lives in a very competitive environment. I tend to be more in the compliance section, a little more reserved than he is. He's very outgoing and he's very task-oriented, and that definitely shows. He's always wanted to be the most successful man in Europe. And he's doing a fantastic job of that so far. I think he would score the lowest on the kind of evasion, compliance attitude. He just doesn't seem to be cautious. He's very set in his ways, and he's really jumped the gun on new businesses. But he's had such a success rate that I don't think anyone's doubting him. Looking at StrengthsFinder, which is a book we had here early in the semester. He seems to be in the achiever strength. He gets a lot done. He really is proud of his achievements, and he's good at what he does as far as getting business ventures to where they need to be to start generating revenue. Anytime he'd have a challenge, he knew the exact way to get around it and overcome it, and I think that's a big, strong set that we see in a lot of leaders. If you can just keep the day-to-day going and keep your team with you and be consistent, I think that's the way that a company can really thrive. Looking at his personality type, he is an ESTJ. I think that's kind of the opposite of what I am as well, but it's good to get an understanding of others. He promotes a strong work ethic. He's a huge extrovert. He's always out and about. He races around the world on these sailboats trying to beat these records, and he's always brought up in multiple TV shows such as Top Gear. He's brought up a lot of American history too, just from what he's all tried to do and accomplished. He senses. He does a good job with sensing, thinking, and judging his actions. The big thing, he's organized, he's prepared when he comes to new business. He's got all his paperwork in order, and he's realistic on what everything needs, and he just doesn't create this reality that will never be able to exist. He's just a good business builder. And that's it. Thanks for watching.